Dr. McQuaid and Dr. Warner, can you tell us about your current research and the current questions that you're currently investigating?
Sure. So I actually look at the role of host and lifestyle factors on melanoma biology and the anti-tumor immune response. So that includes obesity, diet, as well as working with others and looking at sex, age, etc.
My research focuses on the effects of tumor microenvironment and how exercise in particular affects tumor microenvironment. That has been a longstanding interest of mine. It's what I started my PhD work in graduate school, and have now expanded that to currently study how exercise affects immunogenicity and immune response with respect to immune therapy.
Okay, that sounds like you have a lot of shared interests.
Yes.
How did you two meet, by the way?
So Allison, when she was interviewing for fellowship, for her oncology fellowship, she actually came down to MD Anderson, and my mentor, Mike Davis, who is in charge of the MD Anderson Fellowship Physician Scientist program, was like, you've got to meet this, woman. You guys are like totally in sync. And so not only was the science in sync, but then when we met, we just clicked kind of personality-wise as well. And so have stayed friends since. I was not successful at recruiting her to MD Anderson, unfortunately.
She's a lucky charm.
I think the really nice thing is we met at an interview, but we were sort of instant friends, and really soon thereafter became instant collaborators as well. We do have a lot of scientific overlap as well as clinical overlap with what we're interested in. And I think pretty shortly after my interview, we were already talking about projects to start when I got to fellowship, and that has certainly kept rolling for the last several years.
So my next question is, moving towards your friendship, is about how, after becoming friends, how did it help you in terms of your academic research? What kind of work you did together, and how did you move forward with your research?
Yeah, I think our interests are related, but also distinct enough that that it's not competing. It's more complementing, and our backgrounds are also quite different as well. And so, I think just having the friendship enables an extra layer of trust as well.
I think Jen has always been someone that I can bounce ideas off of and get honest feedback. Always welcome, obviously some positive and some negative, but always really helpful feedback about the next direction of my studies, what we can do to help each other out with those studies, but also just knowing, the background of each other's fields pretty well. We're really able to think, what's a logical next step, what might be a future direction, and what's maybe something we don't want to pursue right now.
So it's like you get sort of an independent perspective on your ideas, which is really nice. That suggests that I should have a strong friendship with somebody in science.
For sure. And I think the important thing that Jen pointed out is that, our interests are really complementary and not overlapping, and so we're not competing. And therefore, we really do feel very free to share ideas, thoughts, next grant, etc.
Dr. McQuaid, congratulations. I heard it on Twitter that you have been recently promoted as a tenure track assistant professor in MD Anderson. How has been your experience since the promotion and as a PI?
I mean, it's nice. I can just kick back and do nothing now. I've got minions. No, it's actually, it's a big step and a big challenge in really learning how to run my own lab and be a leader, and trust and delegate. one of the other challenges is actually my mentors will always be mentors, but now they're mentors as well as collaborators. And so how to navigate that relationship when I've stayed at the same institution. But overall, it's a really exciting time. I think my first best move was that I hired somebody that was smarter than me to help really run my lab, and and she's brilliant. And I think of her as a partner. We just have complementary skill sets.
That's great. That's really good. Dr. Beto Warner, you were recently elected as an ASER Council member. How do you manage time between the duties as a member and your research at the same time?
I think when I was young, I learned from my parents that you make time for the things that are really important to you. I really do wish there were 28 or 29 hours in a day. It would make life easier.
Totally.
But, I think it is coming back to Jen's point about learning to trust people, to collaborate, and also delegate. So I have been on the council for 2 years now. I've recently took over the position as chair.
Yes.
And there are a lot of responsibilities that go with doing that, but we have a great group, and building a really strong team that knows how to work together has been sort of priority number one. But that is a important group that does really important work for early career researchers, and it was pivotal to me to get involved and to really be able to help with that.
Okay, that's really nice that you're putting so much care and effort into the career of early stage researchers and thinking about it a lot. It makes me feel so hopeful for my future if I decide to follow that career path.
Well, thank you. I've had phenomenal mentors along the way, and a lot of both senior faculty but younger investigators, Jen and many others included, that have really shown me the path, and I want to make that easier for those that follow.
And we thank you.
My pleasure.
So, Dr. McQuaid, again, this is from the Twitter. You have always embraced the idea of following team science or team-based science approach. What are the effective strategies that you can especially use when you do this kind of research or you use this kind of approach?
Yeah. So, again, I think it's building that trust, and again, finding people that have complementary expertise. With the way science has gone, there's no way that any one of us can be an expert in everything. And I think a sure path to, not to failure, but not to really reaching where you could be is staying so micro focused that you can't incorporate some of the bigger picture. For both of what we do, it's transdisciplinary. If I'm looking at diet and Allison is looking at exercise, eventually we work with behavioralists, for learn how to motivate patients if we're going to do an intervention. We're doing both preclinical and clinical, and then we need to be able to look at the biomarkers, and so having somebody that's an expert in signaling biology and also in immune response. And so we can't all be everything. And so really kind of building those networks of people that you trust and that you that you're afraid to say, I don't know, please give me your expertise and let's work together.
So you would always say to the young trainees that always think of science as a team-based science and not an individual science.
Yeah, I think individual science, is probably a dying sport.
Yes. So the next question is to actually both of you. Dr. McQuaid, you are based at MD Anderson, and Dr. Beto Warner, you are based at Memorial Sloan Kettering Institute. How do you guys find time to interact with each other and sort of bounce ideas that you said in the beginning? So how often do you do it, and how effective is that? It's considering the distance.
I think we're always there. We text. We certainly keep up with each other on Twitter. every time we're both at a meeting, we make it a priority to get dinner, get a drink, just the two of us, and catch up and, you know, share ideas at that point. But we certainly, you know, have phone calls about collaborations with others as well. But Jen's always a text away.
Yeah.
And you would agree to it as well?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when we end up at meetings, we kind of end up joined at the hip. I mean, you'll see us going around the poster sessions together, discussing all of them and engaging, so, yeah.
Okay. You mentioned about Twitter, so the next question is really about that platform. How effective is Twitter as a scientist, and what kind of benefits, especially to young researchers that are not there on Twitter, should be on Twitter? So how do you motivate people to get on Twitter, and why should we join Twitter?
This is so funny because we were actually talking about this morning over coffee. I was really skeptical about Twitter actually a few years back, and when I joined the AACR Council, they really encouraged us to get on Twitter and start tweeting out the meetings and all of those things. And I think it has been just a wonderful experience. I've heard about papers I would have never found. People send me things, including Jen, you know, papers, other ideas, you know, new grants that were just funded, potential collaborators, all through Twitter. But also just the ability to interact with people in a really less hierarchical way. You know, I have some really interesting conversations on Twitter with full tenured professors that I wouldn't have had the chance to meet or interact with otherwise. And then we've met up in person at meetings, you know, and it's been much less intimidating because we've already spoken and interacted.
And you would agree to it, Dr. McQuaid?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's, you know, I was also a little bit reluctant because it seemed like kind of shameless self-promotion.
Shameless plug, I would call it.
Yeah, you know, I was like, what are all these ats and all these hashtags? And honestly, it seemed a little obnoxious to me. But it can be used in that way, which is really off-putting. So I think it's finding that right balance, you know, of it really being, it's supposed to be social media, right? It's supposed to be an engagement. And so if you're really out there engaging in kind of a bi-directional way, then, you know, the promotion part and other people knowing about you and your work is important, but I honestly think even more is learning more from others, and especially seeing interesting things from other fields that I would have never, you know, looked at that journal or found that or heard about it at a conference, but I learned about it because of a more broad engagement.
I think, for example, we just had, just a few weeks back, the first exercise oncology Twitter conference. And it was almost 16 straight hours of programming about exercise oncology from people all over the world. People that probably wouldn't have had a chance to all get together, couldn't have gotten that amount of funding to all meet at a conference, etc. And in 15-minute and half-hour time slots, people shared either their own research or new upcoming things that they were working on, or even important reviews or previous research. And from that, I've gotten countless, you know, people reaching out to me for ideas. How do you do this? Could we collaborate? And that would have never happened without Twitter.
Yeah, I would definitely agree to it because I know both of you from Twitter itself. I had frequent discussions with Dr. McQuaid on Twitter, and we go back and forth in terms of I have a lot of questions, and Dr. McQuaid always makes sure that she answers those questions. And you have recently sent me that immunotherapy paper, which was really fab. I mean, I was looking for a paper like that, and that has been, so it has worked out to my benefit as well. And I would definitely recommend young trainees to join Twitter as well because of a lot of fantastic scientists are there to help you. So then in terms of my next question, we'll talk about how do you maintain your balance between your clinical research and your medical duties in terms of looking at patients. So how do you balance your research aspect and your clinical duties?
Yeah. So I actually, for the past 2 years before my promotion, I was actually 100% research. and so no clinical duties at that time. And they call that protected time. That's always seemed like a really weird term to me. I got into medicine to take care of patients, so the idea of being protected from them doesn't sit very well with me. I really, really, really missed being directly involved in patient care. And getting back to it, I mean, the questions that I'm investigating are the questions that my patients ask me. What should I be doing? Doc, what else should I be doing, right? You're giving me this immunotherapy, but, do I need to avoid all sugar? Do I need to go exercise? What do I need to do? And so these questions are directly relevant to my patients. And so having that constant, kind of interaction, hearing the questions, explaining my research, is just really gratifying. But yeah, sometimes it's a juggling act.
So I'm fortunate that I'm still a fellow, and so our time is pretty structured in that way. So I see patients a half a day a week right now, and I'm in the lab the rest of the time. I've been thinking a lot about this because I'm hoping to make that transition to faculty soon. But I think to Jen's point, particularly we're both very translational researchers, that these two things are, interconnected in a way that they really can't be separated. Our patients give us ideas in their questions, but also, hey doc, I read this. What do you think? Mm-hmm. Some of which hopefully we've seen, but occasionally they find something that we haven't seen. And it brings up important questions that we can bring back to the lab. But I also think that the motivational piece, right, that seeing patients makes those long days and long nights in the lab really worth it, right? Seeing a patient do really well is amazing. Unfortunately, when patients don't do as well, it also sort of lights that fire to get back in the lab and keep working at it. The lab can be a tough place, we all know that.
So in terms of my next question, will be focused towards trainees and then the other aspects towards trainee research. So what kind of advice would you give to young trainees, especially women who are pursuing science or in STEM?
My advice is to find something you're passionate about and study it. I think both of us have done that. It took me a little while in graduate school to really figure out what I was doing. I knew I was going to do oncology, but there's a million different ways to study cancer. And I was really fortunate that I found Lee Jones and he was studying exercise, and as a lifelong athlete, that was something that truly spoke to me, and was co-mentored by Mark Dewhurst, who really gave me the ability to study that in a rigorous scientific way in a mouse model and understand the biology that's happening within a tumor. And that truly, was something I had, one, never even thought about, but two, then met everything that I had hoped to do within science. And it took a few years of some frustration to really get those studies going. But because I loved what I was doing, you sort of keep pushing through that, the long nights, the microscope in the lab and all of those things. But also, after doing my clinical training, brought me right back to doing science. I think that's a stage at which we lose a lot of young scientists, particularly physician scientists, where you finish your clinical training and there seems to be a path to keep going clinically. But if you have something you're truly passionate about and that you study something you love, that question's still waiting for you in the lab.
That's really great advice, I would say. Dr. McQuaid, what would be your advice?
Definitely echo the passion. And then the other thing I think is really mentorship. I came very late to the lab. I had done a teeny amount of lab work in medical school, and I honestly hated it. And then again, developed my own question. I was passionate about it, got in the lab, but without a good mentor, I would have been completely lost. And so, how do you find a good mentor? So it's really somebody that is, my mentor, when I was looking at jobs, he said, you have to look after number one. And I was like, Mike, sometimes I think you're actually better at looking after my interests than I am. And that's really, an amazing mentor. He promoted me, all the way through, made sure that people realized that my work was my work, whether it was for speaking engagements or meeting potential future collaborators. And then ultimately pushed me towards independence. So I think the most important thing really is good mentorship, and that can be a male or a female. I think that some of that recent kerfuffle, people saying that like now males were going to be afraid to mentor young females because of the Me Too movement and et cetera, was something in nature, right? There was like a nature.
No, totally.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I think both of us have been predominantly mentored by male mentors. Both of us have been exceptionally fortunate to have incredible mentors. I have personally sought out some female mentors for sort of life advice too, but I equally go to my male mentors for those questions. I don't think your mentor is defined by their gender.
Yeah.
So mentorship has no gender. Trainings, yes.
Exactly.
So as a trainee, I would always be passionate and find good mentorship can always lead on the good track in my career.
Exactly.
So coming on to the questions about SMR meeting, what do you enjoy the most about this meeting? And is this your first time, or have you been?
So I came to SMR for the first time actually when I was a resident, and the thing I love most about this meeting is how interactive it is. It's not a huge meeting that is so overwhelming that it's difficult to come up and talk to some of the leaders in the field. One of the beauties of melanoma is that almost everyone, I think, in the melanoma community and everyone I've ever met in the melanoma community are really wonderful people, interesting, engaging, and happy to talk to anyone at any stage of their training. And that's particularly showcased at SMR.
Yeah. When I got into when I first started working with Mike on a melanoma-based project, I intended it to be a one-off project. I was using it as a model in a tumor, yeah, and not really intending to go into melanoma. And then it was actually my first SMR meeting that I was like, oh my gosh, these people are awesome. It's just a really fun group, and I think so much of it, it seems like the personality of it comes back to the days when we did not have effective therapy. And so it's a, still more rare tumor type without effective therapies. And so people really had to work together to kind of move it forward. I think that, I think this team science as well, and this collaboration is much stronger in the melanoma community as opposed to, when I talk to my friends that are doing lung cancer, it's a much more competitive, I think, environment and a little bit less
and
collaborative.
I think it's team medicine also. I mean,
yeah,
we happily send our patients back and forth for different trials at different places, or phone a friend to get an idea for a patient that we're struggling with, and I think that happens partially because the people are wonderful, and partially because meetings like this really provide a forum for everyone to get to know each other, and make that much easier to pick up a phone and phone a friend.